Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White. This is Jason's Weird Reads, and if you're into horror books, science fiction, fantasy, especially horror, please hit the subscribe button and comment down below and we'll discuss some books. It's one of my favorite things to do, honestly, and that's what I'm about to do here today. This is my recent reads 2020 number 3. So far in my reading goal of 60 books, I'm pretty far ahead. I think 5 books ahead, so I'm doing pretty well. And here I have, I think it's 13 books, and so let's get into it. This is what I've read since the last one. I was probably reading a couple of these during the last one that I did. I'll try to put a link up there to my recent reads thing. It's over here, actually. Alright, so first up is a book of poetry, and that is I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. Now, this is a very interesting book of poetry. First of all, the poems themselves I absolutely loved. They're very well written, and I recommend it for that alone. But one reason why I really enjoyed this poetry collection is that there's a horror movie reference to each of the poems, and the fact that they were very feminist. I love feminism. I've been bad this year. One thing this year actually is I haven't read too many women or people of color. I need to change that. And but this one, obviously, I did read. It's very angry and pissed off. But the horror movies. There's a lot of horror movie references in here. Each poem has its own horror movie reference, and there's some movies on here that I haven't seen, and it makes me feel that I need to catch up. I just haven't been in a horror or a movie watching mood lately, and this has gone on for more than a year for me. I don't know what's wrong with that. I don't know why I feel that way. So moving on, I also read Tarkin by James Luceno. I hope I pronounced that right. This is a Star Wars book, and Tarkin was a character in the very first movie, A New Hope. Tarkin in the movies was played by Peter Cushing. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. I really love Peter Cushing in all those old Hammer films. So it was really fun to read a Star Wars novel, based on that character who, if you remember, he got to boss Darth Vader around, and so that makes you wonder exactly what kind of power Tarkin has. And this book kind of goes through Tarkin's life a little bit, and you find out just how badass Tarkin actually is. And he's a guy you would not want as your father. Let's just say that. Let's clarify that. The next couple of books that I read actually listened to the audiobook. I don't know if these actually exist in book format. I'm sure they probably do. But me and my son Keenan, we both listened to these audiobooks. They're very short, and they were a lot of fun for him. And that is The Quest for the Diamond Sword by Winter Morgan, and The Mystery of the Griefer's Mark by Winter Morgan. Now, these are Minecraft game books, so it's all set within the Minecraft universe. And one thing I found interesting is that the writer keeps certain things within the game in the books, things that you find in every game, actually, like health and experience points and stuff like that. So it's kind of I would say tongue-in-cheek in a sense. It's very much like playing the video game, except there's a story. Well, Minecraft, I'm not very familiar with Minecraft, to be quite honest with you. Every time I've tried to play it, I just don't understand what exactly it is you're supposed to do. And if you're familiar with Minecraft, please let me know in the comments there. What exactly do you do in that game other than dig and build things? Is that all you do? And if so, is there a point, like an objective? Okay, so these were enjoyable more so for him than me. He absolutely loved them, and actually I recorded a review. Well, not really a review. I think we were in the first book, and we were listening to the first book, and I was talking to him on here on the camera. I took it out because I didn't want YouTube and COPPA to come after me for doing that. So I don't know. I still don't know what to do with that piece. I was thinking of maybe putting it up on my Instagram. It's really cute watching him describe what he's getting out of, I guess it's the quest for the diamond sword. Now that I'm talking about these books, I think actually it was a mistake for me to put the first one, Quest for the Diamond Sword, in here. I think it was on my last recent reads list. But The Mystery of the Griefer's Mark was not. So if you have a kid who's into Minecraft, definitely give these a shot. I think your child might like these. Alright, so I also listened to Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. And this is basically the original continuation of the original trilogy, episodes 4 to 6 of the movies. And Timothy Zahn, I think, well, he wasn't the first to write a Star Wars story set, obviously, in the Star Wars universe. But he was the first to write a series, and he was, I guess, responsible, in a sense, for creating the whole extended universe that began when this book came out. I believe it's like I forget when, 1995 I want to say, or 91, I don't know. But so there's a lot of people out there who've read these books and they're absolutely attached to these books. There's people out there who are totally against the new canon books, and I'm not necessarily on that. I can see why. Sometimes it gets me a little ragey, especially with the new Star Wars films. Excuse me. The writing in the new Star Wars films is rather atrocious. And there's reasons for this. I should probably make its own video based on this, because I could rant about it. So I'm not going to go into why I think the writing was atrocious. Anyone who wants to guess, just watch the last one, Skywalker Rising, or whatever it's called. But having said that, watching these films are, they're beautiful. They feel like Star Wars films in a sense. They're like a mashup between the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels that came out in the early aughts. So take that as you will. I'm a Star Wars fan, and I like the new canon. A lot of the I believe that Tarkin actually is considered new or canon because of when it was written. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed between the two canon and legends. But getting back to my point here with Heir to the Empire, I read the first book and I was hugely meh about it. And I know there's people out there who are going to hate me for this, but I just don't. I think, honestly, had I read this book when it came out, it would have blown my mind so much more than me picking it up in, being a middle-aged dude who's read a lot of books, because it was really just meh. It was kind of boring. It didn't have the urgency. These books, in my opinion, don't have the urgency that the original Star Wars trilogy did, and I don't understand why is it Thrawn? Why he's considered to be this evil genius. So I read Heir to the Empire. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, but really it's like a 3.5 for me. And I DNF'd the second book because it was just more of the same, and it was just... I just don't get it. It's just me, though. I mean, people love these books, and that's great. But for me, it's just not for me. Alright, moving on. I also read The Compleat Crow by Brian Lumley. Now, these are like short stories, all related to Titus Crow, which is a series of sort of like occult detective books set in a Lovecraftian universe. And it was very much like reading, honestly, it felt like reading Sherlock Holmes in a sense, without the cocaine. So I enjoyed that. And sometimes the stories were just a little bit, boring, and honestly didn't really seem to have a point. But there is there's a novella, I think, as the second story, and it was phenomenal. It reminded me a lot of Dracula, Jonathan Harker's story at the beginning of Dracula. Is that Dracula's Guest? And I really enjoyed that. It's not written, in epistolary format. It's just the feel of it, because Titus Crow is a youngster, and he goes and visits this occult master type dude. I forget what he's there for, honestly, but the occult master guy, you're not actually supposed to know he's an occult leader, but I doubt anyone's going to read this. Although I recommend that you should, because it's really good. I did end up, I picked up the second book to this series, because technically this is like the prequel stories to Titus Crow, and I started book one, I think what is supposed to be book one, and I DNF'd it, not because it was bad, but because some other reading obligations sort of made their way forward, and I didn't finish in time, so I hope to finish that soon. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm going to stop with my summarizing of that short story, because I'll probably just edit out all that. But yes, The Compleat Crow by Brian Lumley is the introduction to his Titus Crow stories, and if you're into that sort of occult, Lovecraftian, occult detective, Lovecraftian type setting, then I highly recommend this, especially also if you like literature, classic literature, honestly, because these stories feel like they were written 100 years ago rather than 30 years ago. Next up, I read The Wise Friend by Ramsey Campbell. This book started off really great for me. The funny thing with this book is there's some people who complained about how slow it was, and I would say, yeah, it moves slowly, but I liked the family dynamic in this book more so than the supernatural aspects, honestly. But it was still a good book overall. I think that if you want to try reading Ramsey Campbell, especially modern, today's version of Ramsey Campbell stories, I recommend that you start here, because it's good. And Ramsey Campbell, his writing has changed over the years, as every writer's does. But I can't, I don't know why I'm going in this direction, because I wasn't thinking of going in this direction, but comparing the two would be interesting. I haven't read enough Ramsey Campbell, I guess, to compare old 80s Ramsey Campbell versus the newer stuff that he's written. So I should maybe, I think the idea to compare the two, maybe do an author deep dive on that, because I like Ramsey Campbell, and I feel like I did talk to him once for the Darkness Dwells podcast. If I remember, I'll put the link down there, you can check it out. But I haven't read him enough, and I need to read him more, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But The Wise Friend is basically, it's not really a haunted house story, it's more of it's an occult story on its own. So let's leave it at that. And there's a painter who dies she dies when you meet the main characters. The woman who died, the painter, she's already dead, but She was into the occult, and her paintings have like a strange sort of occult feel to them. And her nephew and her new boyfriend and his new girlfriend decide that they're going to investigate. Not investigate, but they want to go to the places where his aunt, the dead painter, went to paint her pictures. And just as like a memorial type thing, and strange things start to happen. So it was a good story. I liked it a lot. Then I read a couple of new favorites. I should really do a separate review for this book, because although, it's not horror, it's not even technically in my comfort zone of reading, but I really enjoyed this. Now, Charles Heathcote, the author of our Doris here, he has his own YouTube channel, and you should check it out, Charles Heathcote. If I remember, I'll put the link down there. But he wrote this 5 years ago, I think, and this is a series. This is book one of a series. There's 3 in the series so far, and I think Charlie said that it's going to be 4 books. I'm not sure. But this is basically a story of Doris and her husband. I forget his name. But basically, the whole thing here in this book is that the Women's Institute of this couple's community. Here, just let me read you the synopsis. Obviously, I can't formulate thought today. The Partridge Mews Women's Institute have announced a garden safari, and Doris Copeland, pillar of the community with a tenor as Maria in the Sound of Music that involved an awful gastrointestinal bug, plans on securing her position as Fifth House. Join her as she battles ne'er-doer slugs. Ne'er-doer. Yeah, the first story in this, she has a battle on with the slugs in the garden. It's bizarre. Searches for the perfect artisan sausage and comes against her mortal enemy, Janice Dooley of Little Street, all whilst maintaining a perfectly, I don't know what that is, Silvac rind hairstyle. Told from the perspective of her long-suffering husband, Harold, a man who would be content to sit at home watching reruns of Ground Force. This is the first book of the monologues featuring our Doris. Now, as I said, this is a book of they're sort of like short stories, but you do need to read them in order, because as it says at the end there, they're more like monologues, and the monologues, each separate, form into one continuous story, and so and they're quite funny. A lot of the comedy here is very British. And I didn't honestly understand those jokes, but a lot of the humor in here is very everyone could understand it, and I absolutely love this book. And I got hold of Charlie on Twitter, and after reading that, or actually while I was reading it, I was near the end when I contacted him, and I ordered from him the next book in that series, along with his murder mystery that he wrote. And so far, it's probably stuck in postal hell, as we've come to call it here in Ontario, Canada, where our main distribution center is like holding hostage. It feels like they're holding packages hostage, and they won't let them go. All right, this video is going on way too long with me just bumbling around. Next up is Armageddon House by Michael Griffin. I read this. I got this book, actually. I saw Michael Griffin on Twitter asking if there were reviewers out there wanting to get a free copy of this for a review, and I jumped right on board on that because I've read some Michael Griffin before, and one of his other novellas and some short stories, and I want to read more of them. And so this was a perfect opportunity. And while we were talking in DMs there, he suggested contacting the publisher and getting a free copy for me. And so he did that, and I got the free copy, and I read it, and I loved it. This is a very strange story. It starts off with you not knowing exactly what's going on, and it ends with you even more confused. Don't go into this book expecting answers, because you won't get them. This is a journey book, and it's very bizarre. It's very strange. It's weird fiction, and in my opinion, it's weird fiction at its best. All right. Speaking of weird fiction, I also started a series by Laird Barron that I've been meaning to get to since he started publishing them, and that's his Isaiah Coleridge series. And so I read Blood Standard and Black Mountain, and those are, of course, by Laird Barron. And the basic premise of this, if you haven't checked them out yet at all, is that Isaiah Coleridge is he's an ex-mob enforcer, and the first book deals with how he's in Alaska, and it deals with how he stopped being a mob enforcer. Basically, he did something he shouldn't have, and they were going to kill him for it, but at the last second, he gets a reprieve from his boss, and he's told that, you can't stay here, you have to go into exile. And so he goes to upstate New York, where he stays on a farm. And on that farm, there's a girl who goes missing. And so he decides to take it up on himself to go find out where she went to. Now, the reason why the police aren't doing that is because she's a young woman of color, and so they just don't care because she's black. And so he's black too, Isaiah Coleridge, and he's like, you know what, I'm not putting up with this, I'm going to go find her myself. And this series so far, Black Mountain's actually quite different from the first book, which is good. In fact, Black Mountain starts to go back into the weird and terrifying territory that Laird Barron is known for. And I've just started Worse Angels by Laird Barron, and I've heard this is his most creepiest Isaiah Coleridge book yet. And I was listening to Laird Barron on a podcast, I think it was Ink Heist, and he was talking about this book, and he almost sounds like he's trying to pervert the normie reader by introducing them slowly to weird horror, and I would say he's doing that. I mean, the end of Black Mountain it's got its spooky moments, and Laird Barron's very good at that. When he wants to scare you, he can. So I'm enjoying this series a lot. I'm glad I finally dove into it. Next up, also, I read to my son Revenge of the Living Dummy by R.L. Stine. This book was a bit of a disappointment for me. I'm not going to say a bit of a disappointment. It was a lot disappointing. There's a couple of good scenes in it. Nothing was truly spooky. And the living dummy in question, at least on the cover... Alright, from my understanding, the Living Dummy series, it's always slappy. And he's in this story, but it's not even mentioned that it is slappy until near the end. And I don't know, I just wanted more slappy, I guess. And this story didn't necessarily deliver that. But there's also other things lacking. It just didn't feel as inspired as R.L. Stine's other books, and so I didn't really like it that much. I don't think my son liked it very much either, to be quite honest with you. And finally, I just finished this book, I think just last week. I read The Night Owl #1, which is When the Shit Hits the Van, by Chad Lutsky. This is another detective type story where the main character sort of decides to take on the role of private detective. And in this story, it's I forget, Jinx, I think his name is. Jinx, his aunt dies, and she leaves to him her motel. So he inherits the Night Owl, the motel. And it's not really so much a motel where people go to stay, people who are traveling and whatnot. It's more the type of motel that you see where people are renting the rooms and they live there. And so there's quite the cast of characters. And there's also a mystery. The mystery being that somebody keeps taking a dump in the bushes out at the front. And so Jinx and one of the guys who lives there decides to take it upon themselves to figure out who's taking who's passing their bowels into the bush at the front of the place. And you know, it's kind of funny. And for Chad Lutzke, a funny story by Chad Lutzke is kind of rare. And I have to say that also with this book, Chad sent me this book for free, and in exchange for my review. So I'm not going to speak about it too much here because I still owe him that review. And all I'm going to say is that despite my rather shitty description of the story, it's a fun read, and I recommend it. Alright, so I've gone on way too long for this video. And if you've stuck with me this long, thank you. You're special to me. Alright, so please continue being safe out there. And keep being creative, and I will catch you guys all in the next bookish video.